I found Michael Vick to be one of the most interesting people I've interviewed, man. Like his brain just runs at a different speed.
Yeah,
I don't
he's
know.
a
I
he's a
don't know if
complete genius,
yeah. Go ahead.
and he's a sweetheart. Like I was new to crypto and was doing biz dev for a Stanford faculty founded ICO company in winter 2017. And I was sitting down at my first like VC meeting, like in person in New York. It was in a big office. And I was like, oh man, I'm like really doing it. And Michael was in there advising the investor. And I was talking about things that I had memorized, but didn't really understand very well.
Uh-huh.
And Michael was just very patiently like, look, you understand that this kind of works like this, and this kind of works like this. And that's why this is much harder than you think it is. And that's really hard too. So like, he just very, very calmly and patiently walked me through about the 40,000 ways that I was wrong. And we've been friends ever since. It's just been like, I was so lucky to run into him then. And that's just such a funny thing.
And I've always loved it when the podcasts and it just whatever they do the cold start, where they just start in the middle of a sentence and you just feel like you just walked into a conversation. We just managed to do something a little
Yeah.
bit like that. Almost on Zoom, it's impossible. That's too bad. But Michael, his marketing team approached me when they were at very early stages to do an interview, and we just had such a great chat. Michael, you know how he's crazy. He was holding his phone in his hand the whole time, and you could see it shaking. And for round two, I actually made him buy a proper a proper microphone stand, a proper microphone and a stand and a light. And but then he decided to do the whole thing sitting
Thank
on
you.
the
Good.
floor of a
Now when
car
I interview
dealership.
him, he'll be set up.
But then he just didn't have time to go back home, and he did the whole thing sitting in the floor of a car dealership.
That is funny.
Yeah,
That does sound like something he would do.
that's just how he is. But well, after some Michael Beck fanboying here, well, Mike, you did a pretty great job at the documentation of IdeaMarket. I was reading through it. I knew what IdeaMarket was. I heard of it like passing by or on Reddit or whatever. But I actually, now that I knew that you were coming, I took the time to try and register myself in there. I didn't manage to do it because the fees were quite high, and we'll talk about that. But I read the whole documentation. I read the manifesto. I saw the cartoons, everything. I think you did a pretty good job of putting across the personality, both of yourself and of the brand in there. I think it's very clear what IdeaMarket stands for. But for people that don't know IdeaMarket, would you like to give us a quick rundown?
Sure. So IdeaMarket is a lifeboat for people who want to exit the world where authorities and media corporations decide what information is important and what's true and who deserves to be heard. So there's this very precise parallel I like to draw between corporate media and central banks. Bitcoin crypto people are very familiar with the power dynamics and incentive problems with central banks. They have this infinite power to take something that's valuable socially and just create an infinite amount of it without any sort of repercussions or accountability. And media corporations have a very similar power. Central banks can print money and media corporations can print credibility. It kind of doesn't matter how many times they're wrong, how drastically they're wrong, how horrible the consequences are, how obvious it is. You still in 2021 cannot talk to grandma about Bitcoin until the New York Times says good things about Bitcoin. There's this sort of social currency that media corporations provide that legitimize information and opinions in a way that nobody else really can. So what IdeaMarket wants to do is replace the authoritarian rubber stamping of legitimacy that is controlled by media corporations in a cartel-like fashion with a public marketplace that anybody can participate in, with a decentralized marketplace, so that the decisions about what is important to the public and whom to trust and what narratives to watch out for, keep an eye on, is decided by public risk, is decided by skin in the game and market signals, instead of by few media corporations that have done a pretty terrible job, even compared to amateurs, over the last couple decades at least.
And I think, well, there is definitely a need to put things in the hands of average everyday people when it comes to deciding what information is valuable or not, right? And nowadays, at least here in Argentina, there's this trend of fact checkers. Now everybody wants to be a fact checker, which I think we're like 2-3 years behind the rest of the world when it comes to that. But it has come to the point where you can very obviously see the biases of fact checkers. So that didn't really help at all, right? So how did you arrive at the point where you decide that market dynamics are the best thing for this?
Yeah, when I was new to crypto, I come from like a philosophy and meditation psychology kind of background. So
That's why
I
you're
don't
so
have
calm.
a tech background. I hope that I maybe, sure. Yeah, let's go with that. That sounds good. Yeah, so I didn't have a tech background. I didn't have a finance background. So when I got into crypto, I didn't really know anything about the fundamentals of crypto projects. And in those two areas, I guess I kind of still don't, compared to the people who are really technically skilled in those. So in order to figure out what the best projects were, I would go to the weird corners of the internet, like 4chan, like Reddit, like Bitcoin Talk and other forums, where people could post anonymously, and it was just kind of chaotic. And I enjoyed these places because this is where the best information about crypto projects would often become public earliest, first. Like, even if there's a ton of BS and misdirection and all kinds of chaos in these environments, the best or great information often does appear there earliest. And if you can identify it, then there's real advantage there. So I've had a lot of practice sifting through BS to find things. It's a skill that I'm comfortable with. But what struck me about those environments, what struck me about places like 4chan, was that everybody was always saying, "Shill me X, tell me what I'm missing, tell me what's the best thing in the world that nobody knows about." There was this obsessive curiosity, this obsessive hunt for the world's best information on crypto microcap projects. And what I wanted to see if we could do is take that ferocious curiosity and expand the scope of it from crypto projects to all the information on the internet that might be of public import. Because the internet means the best information in the world is already public and free and available and all of that. What's missing is a mechanism that makes everyone want to seek it out really hard, that makes everyone really curious to try to go get it and pursue it and farm it, bring it back into the mainstream. So if markets could do to people about crypto that, if it could instill curiosity in people at that sort of ferocious, scalable level, I wanted to see if we could do the same thing for any information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think one of the main questions that I have all the time, and that I did a panel with the CEOs of Coinbase and Bittrex and so on not long ago, and we were just I was just surprised after doing that how most people in crypto don't have an answer for the same kind of questions, right? Because we all agree on a lot of things, we all have a lot of common ideas, but at the same time, a lot of us do not know, for example, what's needed to take this thing into the mainstream, what's needed to get everybody involved in understanding Bitcoin. That's one that's already a little bit in the past, right? But you understand the direction I'm going to, or the decentralized internet, or whatever it is. And it just strikes me as one of those things where you would wonder if this is something that will ever only interest a bunch of nerds, as opposed to like getting everyone on board with market dynamics for ideas.
Yeah, it seems like with any new thing, there's a core group of people that like understands the relevance really well and thinks it's really cool. And then as that grows, the narrative around it changes to fit the demographic that it's now appealing to. Like Bitcoin was, this very early, the very early days of Bitcoin, it was only understood by the technical people who are already dealing with e-gold and digital currency and the idea at first. And then I'm not really a Bitcoin historian, but the narrative around it has evolved between like digital cash, be your own bank, store of value, like reserve currency. The sort of unifying meme around it seems to change with the fan base as the fan base's knowledge is different. But I'm not sure that addresses what you were talking about with respect to let me see if I can do a better job understanding what your question actually was, which is notice. I think you're saying that you noticed that even though we have a lot of smart people in this space, there are certain questions that we struggle to answer. Like there's no universal crypto answer for how do we get mainstream involved. There's no universal answer for how do we teach people about Bitcoin. Is that kind of what you're going for?
I think there is not even a universal answer for is this thing actually valuable?
Yeah.
I believe that it is, and you believe that it is, and everyone that comes on the podcast believe that it is. But the reason this thing isn't completely fully mainstream is because, to be honest, not everyone in the world thinks it is, right? Otherwise, it would be just given.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of coming to conclusions often looks kind of like weather, especially in like big groups of people. You have actually all kinds of forces that are kind of interacting and pressing on each other. And it's not just about calculating, is this X, yes or no? Because with people who are not crypto fans already, crypto people are kind of known as sort of a weird outgroup. That's kind of changing now because of all the mainstream attention that it's getting. But throughout crypto's history, it's been a weird outgroup. Like I remember talking to my own brother and telling him about Bitcoin, and he goes, "That makes a lot of sense, but I don't want to be a crypto person. Like you're weird. Like, it was a weird outgroup." So like a lot of the lack of persuasion that's happening that you can see in the mainstream just comes from people's sort of natural desire to maintain a social identity that they're comfortable with. It has nothing to do with the actual merits of the things, with the actual situations that are going on. There's a whole other kind of psychological calculus, emotional calculus, social calculus that's going on. And not even necessarily consciously. My brother's a reflective dude. He like picked up on it, on the surface, but a lot of these kind of emotional consideration decisions happen just sort of automatically as a course of everyday functioning. So the problem of selling something new like Bitcoin is more than the merits. It's about making it feel like this is for me. I'm okay with this. This is something that speaks to me and that I'm comfortable with. Yeah, I'll start there. That's probably like one of the big hindrances that, it's just not cool to, and this actually is really core to IdeaMarket, because what media corporations do is they control what is allowed to be cool to a large extent. I can't talk to grandma about Bitcoin unless the New York Times talks about it, because she depends on the New York Times to say, this is okay for you to believe. This is okay for you to entertain. And that power tends to be wielded to obstruct progress and to obstruct thinking. There's no secret that media corporations have tended to be unfriendly to Bitcoin and crypto as a general orientation. And by controlling what is allowed to be cool, what is mainstream, and who is outcast or ostracized or ignored in a certain way, it affects the landscape of persuasion. It affects what has to happen in order to reach those people, because it becomes less a matter of choosing between two equal alternatives and more a matter of, do I like this thing enough that I will risk my social and emotional identity to pursue it? It just makes it much more uphill. So if we can level that out, if we can take away this sort of unilateral cartel-like control over what's publicly acceptable, what's socially acceptable in like a mainstream sense or a institutional sense, people will have a much easier time being rational, because it's not about social acceptance so much anymore. If we can make it about the actual things and not about the status games, then persuading people about something good becomes much more about that good thing's merits.
Mm-hmm. I'm just writing down something that I wanted to tell you later, but I'm thinking here because I'm a big fan of Visa. Not the company, but Visa, the guy.
Yeah.
How would you describe Visa? I was thinking, how can I describe this dude? I have no idea what to say about him other than he's Singaporean and a bit crazy.
Yeah, I like him a lot too, and we just interviewed him on our podcast. You probably saw that.
I watched the whole thing. I love this guy, and I love the conversation that you had, and that's what brought it back to me. He was talking about how in the early days, nowadays we consider jazz to be this very posh thing, jazz music that is, and to be this thing where parents would send their kids to school to learn how to play jazz, and the gold standard of being a musician is whether you can play jazz, and from that bubble everything gets sort of like looked down onto just because that's, yeah, again, the gold standard of music. And he was making the point that back in the early days of that, it was very much a thing where it would be a rebel thing to do, and it would be sort of like an outcast thing to do, and people would do it to have fun, and people would like, okay, there are those weirdos playing their jazz again, they don't know how to play real songs, or they don't play the right notes or whatever. And just like you said, as people's identities started catching up to this, and they started getting the feeling that this is a group of people that I would want people to identify me with, then that's when the whole thing catched up. And it's very relevant to what you were saying, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't get this thought out of my head, so I'm just going to say it. This, as you were talking about what, the connection that Visa made, it reminded me of something that I call the anus principle, which is like on most animals, the reproductive life-giving organs are right next to the pooping excreting organs. They're like
Really?
together in the same location on the body. I mean, come on, like think about your own anatomy. The life-giving is right next to the eliminating,
How
and
do you know?
Well, if you're anything like me, let's put it that way. Assuming you're not from some other planet. Yeah. So I think what Visa is talking about there is sort of the cultural version of that the things that are really great and natural and prosperous and fruitful often come from like the sort of dark, dirty looking and feeling places of society, because that's where like the honesty is, or that's where the pain is, that's where the alchemy is. There's something particularly generative about being near or in the dirt. And so the sort of crypto coming out of these outcasts and jazz coming out of downtrodden Black people who are just trying to have a good time and experiment and all that. It seems to be a parallel. Does that metaphor make sense, or am I being way too abstract and weird?
No, it is. Why not both? It's making perfect sense.
Okay, cool. I don't know how we got onto that, but yeah, Visa, he's awesome. How would I describe him? I think the way he describes himself is very adequate, a very apt, friendly, ambitious nerd. And I think I like that he uses nerd. A nerd, I think he picked that word strategically to be a little self-deprecating, because He's really quite a remarkable dude. And I think the thing that I appreciate the most about him is his imagination, because that's the kind of thing that just unlocks extra dimensions of possibility from the opportunities that we already have.
You know what I really appreciate
Yeah.
about him? He's a, and he's coming on the podcast eventually. I'm in communication with him. He's coming. It's just like a matter of sorting my own schedule. Thanks, Bisa, if you're watching this. So what I really appreciate about this dude is that he's very fast to take his own ideas seriously and just put them out there. Whereas, like, for someone to go the route he's gone and just because he gives quite a bit of advice, right? And that's frowned upon by some people, unless you're the big CEO or unless you're the big founder, or unless you're the big this and this and that. And this guy is just like, nope, I think this is cool. I'm going to tell everyone that they should do it. And yeah, man, I wish I was more like that.
Yeah, I think he's earned a lot of respect in the Twitter circles that he operates in, and I think it's extremely well deserved. So I'm excited to see how his trajectory continues, and I'd like to be a part of that story in some way.
And he knows something about crypto. That's what I want to pick his mind on. I want to know what he knows about that and what he thinks about that, because I think he's enough of an outsider for it to be a very interesting conversation. Going a little bit backtracking a little bit to the IdeaMarket, I was wondering on this. Often when you do social media or when you do content, when you are an artist, even whatever, the circles that you operate on tend to reward you for certain behaviors. So if I upload a video with Michael Beck, who we were talking to about in the beginning, I know that's going to get a lot of likes because his community really likes the dynamic we get. And I know that incentivates me to try and get Michael here as often as I can, right? And that also incentivates him to come here because he knows those videos tend to do well and that his community likes them. That goes all the way to the way people do their thumbnails. People tend to speak about a certain topics all over and over. I mean, David Graeber would say that the worst thing that someone with an idea can do is become famous, because then the world just wants you to keep repeating that idea instead of coming up with new ones. So don't you think that entering market dynamics into this can exacerbate that problem?
I want to make sure I understand the problem you're describing. Is it the problem that people follow the incentives, or can you just maybe rephrase it for me?
Yeah, so going back to the Michael Beck example, since that's the one that was laid down, that's a behavior that I did, and because of pure randomness, that's something that did well. And now the following that I got because of that is encouraging me to keep doing more and more of that. So in that way,
okay.
your followership sort of shapes you, right?
Yeah, you're incentivized to be repeating an idea. Yeah, and so you end up sort of being shaped into something specific instead of having your full creativity and full range of options.
Yeah, we can call it a product even.
Something like that. Yeah.
Or a brand.
Yeah. The important thing is that markets incentivize people for discovering value. And whether a person displeases their fans in the short term or not, what ultimately matters is whether they are contributing value to the conversation. Because if, let's say, they get big, they get famous with their one idea, and then they have this other idea and they lose a lot of their fame and a lot of their power because their previous fan base didn't like it. If that second idea was really useful, the course of history will redeem them. And course of history, sounds like a long hundreds of years thing, but it might be weeks, it might be months. Like, time moves fast right now. People have flip-flopped so much on COVID in the last, couple of years that you can really quickly comb through who has the finger on the pulse of reality and who doesn't. So the market dynamic is about improving signal over time and separating genuine and enduring value from merely creating the impression of value. So people who do that will give their audiences a reason to support them as they go forward. And the pressure to maybe keep saying your one idea over and over is just another factor that the market will have to deal with and that the individual will have to deal with. And that's one of the things that I respect about markets, is that they enable such freedom of decision by the public and by the subject of the market. There's no hard and fast, rules about how to succeed. Just deliver value, just win confidence. And that's really what common knowledge making, that's really what narrative making, that's really what credibility building is about. It's about earning the trust. And however you do that is fair game, because if you fake it, it will be discovered. It will be expensive.
In your documents, you add something about that, right? Something about the way that if people want to use this as a way to manipulate the perception of others, of themselves, then it's like the opposite side of the coin of this thing that says information benefits from you trying to censor it, right? That's like the opposite. A reputation that you're trying to artificially pump eventually ends up collapsing even harder.
Yeah. And the clearest bifurcation there is that IdeaMarket gives a new income stream to voices that genuinely earn trust, because the money that people use to buy upvotes for their listing generates interest that then the owner of that listing can claim. And that becomes this new passive income stream, strictly in proportion to the trust that they earn from their audience. And if some propagandist or fake news purveyor or what have you wants to create the impression of that trust without having actually earned it, they have to pay out of pocket to buy themselves a high rank, whereas someone who genuinely earns it has crowdsourced the money that generates their passive income stream. So for genuinely earning trust, it becomes a new income stream. And for pretending to have earned trust, it becomes a new marketing cost off of the net, off of that entity's net. So that sort of creates this profitability divide between people who genuinely earn trust from their audience and those who just want to create the impression of it.
And I'm curious, why did you decide to go this model then, as opposed to, let's say, decentralized Patreon?
Yeah, because something like a decentralized Patreon is about selling goods, which is not necessarily the same thing as creating value. And also, the selling goods aspect comes from, well, I didn't word that very well. Obviously, if you're selling goods, you're creating value in the perception of the audience. That's not quite what I meant to say. So let me start over then. IdeaMarket's goal is to help the world's best information reach the largest number of people. And Patreon is essentially it's either a paywall-based system or a donation-based system. Mm-hmm. And both of those interrupt that mission. If it's paywall-based, then the most people possible aren't seeing it. If it's donation-based, then the account owner is incentivized to speak directly to their donation base and not really anything else. They have to appeal to that crowd that is actually responsible for their salary. So IdeaMarket does it this way because we want journalists to be able to have an income stream without any paywalls, just based on the trust they earn from their audience for their free content, and also to enable them to speak to the widest audience possible, to not be beholden to a core group of donors or something like that.
Mhm. And there is also a use case for donations that I would like you to talk about. In your website, you mentioned the example of Gitcoin, but yeah.
I really like Gitcoin, but I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to, but I'll take a stab here. Given that the deposits against upvotes earn interest and pay out an income stream, what IdeaMarket is basically a protocol for is market curated endowments. And this means that if a donor wants to come along and fund a journalist for a year, they can just put $1 million into IdeaMarket smart contracts and to buy upvotes for, let's say, Glenn Greenwald, right? And that $1 million will earn interest that Glenn Greenwald can claim. So that would probably produce between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. And then the donor can simply take his money back. That money is not gone. It was used to produce income that goes to somebody. So there's a potential capital efficiency that IdeaMarket unlocks, particularly for donors and activists, that is not so available elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Just for people not understanding this, can you clarify the difference between buying tokens and buying upvotes?
Yeah, I'm using the terms interchangeably, but I don't mean to. IdeaMarket works sort of like a marketized Reddit. And what people are doing when they support a listing is they're buying upvotes. It's like a Reddit upvote in that the important thing is what gets upvoted gets seen more. So when you're buying upvotes, you're basically betting that this is so good that more people will want to see it. And if I use money to signal that more people will see it, then even more people will agree with me and say that even more people should want to see it and continue to buy up further than that. So the upvotes are governed by a bonding curve. So the upvotes are technically tokens. Upvotes is just the more accurate sort of UX term to explain what's going on. It's technically a token. We call it an upvote because that is how the UX works. I don't mean to talk about those things as being different things.
There is because I'm thinking about the way you're phrasing it, and I was wondering that it would look, it looks okay to me when I go into a website like yours, and it's I understand the proposition. Like I said, I tried to list myself. Man, the gas fee was like $500 at the time I tried to list myself. I don't know what happened today that people are competing so hard for gas, but that was just it. Anyways, I try to list myself. I connect my MetaMask. I pay whatever tokens I have, DAI, Ethereum, etc. Somehow, I get a feeling that it would be really weird if I was given a credit card option. Like it wouldn't feel right to do a system that's just like this, but with fiat. Why do you think that is?
Well, I want to talk about the gas fees first. I don't want to just let that slide by. First, Ethereum layer one's congestion is an industry-wide problem that everyone's been noticing and struggling to fix for a couple of years, and we're getting very close to migrating to Arbitrum to reduce those gas fees to a small fraction of what they are now. But in particular, I suspect your experience was influenced by the NFT craze that is popping off right now, because there are a lot of gas wars in the NFT craze, as whales will pay extremely high gas fees in order to be prioritized in acquiring NFTs that are expected to become valuable or part of a renowned collection or something like that. So there are a lot of gas wars happening. Yeah. And that drastically affects the gas price on Ethereum layer 1. And so normally things wouldn't be even a couple months ago, things were about a tenth of that on Ethereum layer 1, which is still $50 per transaction. That's still not tenable, but 500 is kind of nuts. And it's just where the industry is at right now.
I did a walkthrough video not too long ago, like 1 week ago, showing how to swap some tokens on Uniswap, whatever. And the gas fee was something like $40 exactly. So it's not like it's completely fixed. This is something that some people don't fully understand about EIP 1559. They think it's a bit ridiculous to have a tipping system for the miners, but what that does, and somehow it's not completely occurring right now if you want your transactions to happen fast. But what that would do is exactly that: you take the gas wars out of the main chain and you don't effectively punish everyone for trying to do regular operations on Ethereum. I'm just trying to remember what I asked you before we went on the gas tangent. Yeah. Well, yeah, it would feel weird to do this with cash. It would feel weird to do this with like my credit card, wouldn't it?
Well, I really aim for it to not feel weird. I want it to not feel weird. We actually launched with a credit card option. Really? Oh, you don't think it feels weird?
No. I didn't feel. Yeah, I didn't get a weird feeling at all. I was just thinking that if it had been through like fiat somehow, maybe that's because I'm part of the crypto community. Maybe that's because I'm used to this kind of thing. But yes, I guess if it would have been fiat, it would have felt weird. But I didn't know you used to have a credit card option.
We did, yeah. We launched with one because we were routing it through Portis, which has a fiat on-ramp in it through Shapeshift, I think. And that was technically working, but given that it's extra transactions and other middlemen need to take a fee, the gas fee was even 5 or 6 times higher than it is on layer 1. So it's just a completely infeasible option for people. But we're absolutely aiming in that direction because we want people to easily have access to this ability to influence narratives without depending on media corporations to accommodate you.
And it's not really taking fiat if you're going through an on-ramp, right? Because anyways, the fiat is ending up turned into crypto. The Blockchain People podcast is brought to you by Coin Payments, the world's first and leading crypto payment processor. Coin Payments serves over 70,000 merchants in over 200 nations with industry-low fees since 2013. The Coin Payments wallet lets users hold over 2,000 different cryptocurrencies, which is why they're used by giants such as NordVPN and Binance. Whether you're a merchant or an individual looking to get paid in crypto, Coin Payments could be just what you need. But I guess if it's a fiat on-ramp, that's not the same thing as just taking people's cash, right? Somehow you get a feeling that this is crypto that gets put into the smart contract in the end.
Yeah. Given the amount of distrust of institutions right now, I don't think having a fiat version of this system would be very effective at this point. Not that it would, because it would make things too easy to obstruct and censor. If something like this had been around 50 or 100 years ago, so that the public could decide on a stock market type interface which publications they trust and things like that, that might have improved the iteration rate of cultural knowledge, or it might have been a tool of manipulation that just gave people the impression of that. Like as long as these systems are centralized and opaque, there are ways to take advantage of people's ignorance of the inner workings and shift things in a way that's not honest. So this is really something that seems to be appearing at the right technological moment, at the first moment that it can really be meaningful. But the historical stuff is only speculation.
How does your, because I'm assuming that you want to get people from the crypto world as well as people from outside the crypto world. So how is your strategy to go with the second type? How does it look like? I reckon that you don't have much competition, so you can really open about what you're planning to do.
Yeah, of course. So we've designed IdeaMarket to be very familiar to non-crypto people. It's supposed to feel like Reddit. It's supposed to feel like a market. And these are experiences that people are already familiar with and comfortable with. It's not like yield farming where you have to learn 12 new skills in order to figure out what's going on. And that's the feeling that we want to give people. We have made everything as simple as possible on purpose so that as the UX barriers that are still difficult in crypto fall down and the general public has an easier time interacting with it, that there's no more barrier to understanding than is absolutely necessary. So we are designing it from the beginning with the public in mind.
And from the perspective of the person that would want to list themselves, is this like passive income sale point, or are you aiming, this is more interesting than what I was going to ask, are you aiming to at some point connect to any type of decentralized social media?
Yeah, actually, we're built to be a primitive that any media platform can plug into for market curation aspects or features. So right now we launched with Twitter and Substack, but it would be pretty trivial to add any decentralized social media platform that arises. So yeah, we're ready to facilitate all of the competitors in that space and give them market curation from the start and give them a new income stream that they wouldn't have had from the start. We're absolutely there for that.
What I'm curious, what's your take on these? They just did the announcement the other day, didn't they? From Twitter that they're working on a decentralized version of Twitter. I don't know how to feel about that because in the end, it's Twitter. I mean, you don't want your new lord to be the same old lord. At the very least, you will want some variety in that sense. Although Jack seems like he's got his heart in the right place and that he just sort of got handed a set of cards that he never asked for, and he's just trying to live up to the challenge. I don't know, man. What do you make of all of this?
I am inclined to think that Jack's heart is in the right place. And the challenge is he already broke one paradigm by inventing Twitter and making it the phenomenon that it is. Mm-hmm. It seems unlikely that he would be able to do that again. It seems more likely that someone else will build something that comes to play that role at some point. On the other hand, the incumbents do have an incredible amount of power and momentum from users starting there. And wow, I'm going to directly contradict myself here, actually. I don't want to say that it's unlikely.
You have to.
No. I want to be clear. I want to clarify what I just said. I think I said something like it's unlikely that Jack will be able to do it again or that Twitter will be able to do it again. I take that back. I actually think it's pretty likely that these giant incumbent powers will retain their power in a meaningful capacity. It actually seems pretty unlikely that they will be completely supplanted by some new upstart coming from nowhere. Mm-hmm. Particularly because the user experience of social media has to change in order for people to get excited about a new platform. No one's going to switch from Twitter to decentralized Twitter by the fact of its decentralization. But people will switch from Twitter to Snapchat because it's a totally different experience. Mm-hmm. People will switch from YouTube to TikTok because it's a totally different experience. People will switch from Twitter to Reddit because it's a totally different experience. So unless whatever decentralized social media comes out of the crypto world provides a totally different experience, Twitter will keep being Twitter and Facebook will keep being Facebook, just by virtue of this is what people are accustomed to using for that experience. So let me see if I can summarize real quick. I think Jack's heart's in the right place. I think Twitter and incumbent social media are going to stay powerful in some form. And I still think there's a ton of room for innovation and surprises. Yeah. The use case has to be different if some small platform is going to play on the same playing field as the giant incumbents. And I expect some will. There's just so much to do with the crypto tech stack, not only already, but in the future, that I expect that the Snapchats and TikToks and new social media services of the future will be crypto-based. But Twitter seems kind of likely to stay Twitter just because it's Twitter. And that's
interesting. Yeah. I never thought about this. Because when we talk about social media in the decentralized world, often people are talking about doing decentralized versions of the same thing, right? Not quite doing completely new things from scratch, which I would have to agree with you right now that that's more plausible. And I didn't mean to laugh at you contradicting yourself. I was just laughing because it's hard to, you have to have like these nuanced thoughts that you want to stick to trying to find the truth. And of course, at some points, you just find things that seem to directly contradict each other, right? Such as this. I just misspoke. Well, one thing that it's funny to me about Jack is that he seems to be this very hardcore Bitcoin maximalist. He doesn't really seem to have thought much about the Ethereum ecosystem, which, if you would ask me, it seems that's way further in his alley. But why would that be? Do you have any theories?
Yeah, I'm seeing kind of a psychosocial division in the crypto industry along similar lines as political divisions in the general public. You have the sort of conservative, almost militaristic, traditionalist sort of crowd that's very attracted to Bitcoin and only Bitcoin. And then you have the creative, diversity-focused, flexibility-focused. Did I just hit the mic? Are we cool?
No problem.
All right. And then we have the diversity-focused, creativity-focused, inclusion-focused people surrounding Ethereum. Like the sort of psychological profiles of these two halves of the crypto industry very much mirror the two halves of the political spectrum in particularly America, I guess you could say. And it comes down to what Robin Hanson calls the elephant in the brain, that we have these sort of orientations, these emotional orientations that are, they're kind of our psychological architecture. Did you ever make one of those like marshmallows and toothpicks, like structures in school, like you have to build a structure that can like stand up and withstand itself. Well, human beings put up with a lot of shit. They have to deal with a lot of shit in their lives. And we have to figure out, how are we going to hold it all and still be able to function? How do we hold our emotional baggage? And the ways we do that fall into patterns. And one of the major ones is something like this division that we're seeing both in politics and in crypto. So it just so happens that Jack may have a leaning somewhat toward the Bitcoiner side of this psychological architecture thing. I'm just speculating here, but it seems reasonable to extend Bitcoin culture up to him. I don't know his personal situation, of course. But this is something I emphasize this because it's not necessarily a character flaw or moral failing on his part. It's just kind of how, if I'm right about this speculation about his psychological architecture, it's just how he deals with being a human, and this is how his dealing with being a human intersects with the crypto world and all the choices and options that it provides. So I'm not like mad at him for that. I do think Ethereum would be far better suited to Twitter's future than something Bitcoin based. And that's one of the reasons I'm building IdeaMarket and making it very easy for Twitter to just plug into if they so choose and get the income stream and the market-based moderation for that. Mm-hmm. But I still have a lot of optimism that he's a brilliant guy and knows a good opportunity when he sees one. And I think we're still very, very early in this game. And I look forward to seeing how things unfold.
I think that my favorite thing that people have built on top of Twitter wasn't even built by Twitter. It was the Mask network. The fact that you can have these plugins that interact with your crypto wallets directly on Twitter, and they look so beautiful and they're so nice and everything. And they're built on Ethereum. And because of the way the Twitter corporation tends to act, there's been fairly, a great number of accusations of them censoring right-wing people, right? Or at the very least, that's the type of people that tends to complain that Twitter is censoring them or shadow banning them or whatever. So yeah, he would look more like on the Ethereum side of things, which weirdly he isn't. And I think they do see the value in the Mask network and everything used there, which just makes the whole contradiction a bigger pile of mysteries. Did they say anything about how this decentralized Twitter is going to look like? Blue Sky, is it called?
It's called Blue Sky, and I don't know very much about the details of it. I have not heard anything incredibly specific, and that could be because I'm not paying attention, and it could be because it's a big, centralized corporation black project that they give you super vague information about, and that's it. So if anyone out there knows details about what Blue Sky is going to be like, please let me know, because I'm not clued in on that.
It'd be great to know how they're planning this, and the angle that you bring to the table, the angle of let's try and do something new that's pro crypto instead of just doing the same thing with crypto. Those seem like something that could have originated in that table as well, right? They wouldn't just want to build their own decentralized replacement and tell everyone to hop on that instead. Although if he wanted to, he would be able to. He has more than enough money by now. I reckon that he'd be more than happy to step down and just be a normal person for once. He does look like that type.
If I understand correctly, he has to deal with a pretty unprecedented set of incentive forces, given that he is the CEO of this publicly traded company that is deeply entrenched in traditional finance with Twitter's market cap on NASDAQ and all that. And to transition that to some kind of token-based governance or functioning or something like that, it just seems like an absolute monster of an undertaking. Not only technically, but because of all the people he has contracts and fiduciary responsibilities to. Technically, the technical aspects of decentralizing Twitter seems like only half the battle, and because of that, a possible outcome may be that it'll take so long that it'll be unrecognizable by the time it's done. So I don't know, but whatever they do, IdeaMarket will be ready for it, because we're built to be a hub for social media platforms to plug into for that.
And if he does, I mean, if we think about the most entertaining outcome being the most likely, it'd be pretty entertaining to him just to see him saying, you know what, we built a decentralized version. You can go, you can go and use that. We're turning this into a DAO. I'm stepping down. I would just love to see something like that. I don't think it's too likely to happen, but
yeah, I think something like that would be really cool, especially if he's able to do it without creating too much actual harm. Man, honestly, he's operating in a realm of incentives and responsibilities that I don't know very much about. So in theory, yeah, I'd love for Twitter to be as open and decentralized and transparent and blockchainified as in theory it could be. It's a hard problem, man. It's a really hard problem.
Incentives and motivations are also very interesting in the decentralized world, because you see, of course, when we're talking about Jack, we're talking about the billions of dollars invested in Twitter and the worth and all the people that whose livelihood depends on that. So he's got to be careful, right? You cannot just burn it all to the ground from one day to the other. But in the decentralized world, we very much, this was my main takeaway with Gitcoin's Kevin Owocki. He did mention that if he would be able to go 10 years back in time, 5 years back in time, he would just try to drive across the point that we wasted a lot of time in crypto trying to turn people and decentralized systems into incentive machines. That what motivates a person is more profound and comes from a lot of different places that just here have a bunch of tokens. Particularly when we have to be real about this, particularly when you're in certain nations that are more developed and everything. I do get the feeling that and you see that with bounty hunters, right? There's the uncomfortable truth that most people that do bounties are often in developing nations where there's more than worth their time pursuing these tasks for a little bit of a couple of dollars, just in able to earn more money doing that they would do with a regular job in their nation. And we have to accept that truth. But I digress. I think there's very interesting possibilities for blockchains and decentralized systems to enable systems that are not necessarily capitalistic in nature.
Yeah, 100%.
And
yeah,
if you ever wanted to do, if you ever talk to a communist or whatever, and they say, well, communism was never tried the right way or whatever, well, this would be like a good way to try it the right way, right? Because you wouldn't have a central authority that's a person. You would have a centralized authority that it's a code. And I think IdeaMarket sort of can play into this system, right?
I mean, we are a decentralized protocol with open source code and all of that. So in that respect, absolutely. And I do agree that it seems like if communism can work, it would require something like we have now with blockchain technology. And one of the most fascinating things I'm seeing is that a lot of crypto VCs, like the most staunch capitalists in the world, are singing the praises of community ownership, of social ownership, of shared or public ownership of protocols and things like that. And if you look at socialism on Wikipedia, that's in the first paragraph. That's like socialism has many, political and ideological things, but what they all have in common is social ownership, blah, 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 blah. Like that's the core definition of socialism.
Right.
And the freaking Mike Tysons of capitalism are singing its praises and not calling it that. They're, it's community ownership. It's the future of blah, 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 blah. And I think it's really funny that the core of socialism, not in the like the boogeyman version of the word, but the actual technical definition,
Yeah.
is being championed in this sort of backdoor way. It's kind of, it's just funny to watch. And I've been kind of debating whether this is something to publicize or to just let people pretend it's not socialism and let it keep happening.
I mean, there's this very interesting distinction that if you have a dog or a wife or kids or a family or people you love, you're pretty much socialist with them or communist. The definition is a bit fussy, but you're pretty much like that with them. It's only when the scales get bigger that you tend to be more capitalistic and more, and you want to shift the dynamics because somehow they don't make sense, right? I cannot just go outside in the street, pick up 10 random people and just assume that we're all going to have each other's best interest at heart. But in a small enough scale, you do. And that's also a reason why smaller societies tend to perform better in terms of poverty and all that. And I was thinking about the same problem that you were speaking about. Why are these capitalists backing up DAOs? It's like a perfect contradiction. It's like they're voting for socialism. But right now I guess right now we're in the middle line where there's still a way for them to get rich off of promoting that idea, so they don't care, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's in a way very validating to IdeaMarket's thesis, in the sense that markets make people pursue the value where it really is and disregard the taboos around it and the stigmas around it and things like that. Like in a market, value finds a way to be recognized. And I think that's kind of what's happened here, that in this very capitalism driven free market style society, at least philosophically, if not practically, socialism is finding ways to attract capital attention because there's value in it, in ways that there hasn't been as immediate and as accessible and as exploitable before. So, yes.
Mm. So you do believe in the invisible hand of the market and all of this?
Yeah, I believe that people can only discover truth to the extent that they prioritize it over other things.
Mm-hmm.
To whatever extent that we prefer like social belonging or money or power or something like that over a better, clearer, more accurate relationship with reality, the more we'll let that reality go to the side. Like reality is so very gentle. It will not force itself on you. Even when it forces itself on you, even if you get hit with a big hammer, you can go, no, this is fine. Like if, it won't make you believe it. It'll just be there and let you do what you want.
Right.
So any kind of mechanism that makes people curious, that makes people want truth more than they would otherwise, is going to advance the recognition of truth. So whether it's like an invisible hand or what, I just think there's a very sort of natural, non-coercive, and human nature aligned aspect to markets that leaves people free to make their own value judgments, and then also rewards people who make generally better value judgments and punishes people who make generally worse value judgments. So in that sense, markets help make people want truth by paying them reasonably reliably for doing that. That's what I believe in.
And you include in your documents, I tell you, when I do my research, I read the whole thing. In your documents, you include a very interesting bit about God and truth. Would you like to speak to that?
About God and truth?
Uh-huh.
What did I say?
It
Would you
was
remind me?
it was a quote that went something along the lines of truth originates from God.
I don't think I said that in the documents.
It was
I don't remember that.
I can pull it up.
Yeah, please, please
Give
find
me a
it. Please,
give me a
this
second.
sounds interesting. Yeah, take your time.
I'll pull it up. In the meantime, I wanted to ask you because two screenshots that I saw in there, well, one of the screenshots that I saw in there, it featured as I guess it was a placeholder for what IdeaMarket would look like. It featured Naval Ravikant and it featured Nassim Taleb. You a fan of them?
Yeah, I appreciate their work. Yes, Taleb's idea that rationality is risk management was kind of a fundamental, starting point for IdeaMarket. I really think that's an incredibly key epistemic heuristic for the modern age.
I'm a big fan of Taleb, huge fan, and I was very interested in seeing his criticism of Bitcoin lately. What do you make of that?
Um, I don't know. His economic expertise is so unfathomably greater than mine that I don't really know how to think about his judgments.
Mm-hmm.
And my reasons for believing in Bitcoin make sense to me, and so I don't really, stress too much about his opinion if it's negative. Um, yeah, I don't really have a particular reaction. I wouldn't know how to engage with it.
It was pardon the pun, but it was a bit of a black swan that he was singing praises of Bitcoin for so long before this happened, and all of a sudden he just changed his mind, and it's something quite admirable of him that he's just willing to completely go on the flip side and say, you know what, I've been looking more deeply into this thing, and this actually I think doesn't have value regardless of what you think of that. And of course, we tend to idolize people and make more of them than they would want to. And that didn't stop from making a lot of his followers very angry, though. And I found the bit I was telling you about is in the open letter to revolutionaries, and
Oh,
in the
yes.
bottom of it, I'm just gonna read
Yeah.
verbatim. My personal experience is that truth is real. It exists. It's a force of nature. It harmonizes and blesses and loves, and God is behind it. When the burden of power weighs on you, I encourage you to simply seek honesty, and that often means seeking God. If you don't know what it is, you don't know, pray. So yeah, I was very interested in this bit. You don't tend to see the word God mentioned a lot in a crypto project, so I just wanted to pick your mind on that.
Sure. Well, IdeaMarket is about surfacing unpopular truths or important truths or whatever. And just in terms of walking the talk a little bit, I think the existence of God is an important truth. I think that's important. I think it's an important thing to say. And I don't mean it in like a religious dogmatist way, but in a very IdeaMarket-y sense of the term. Like this is underappreciated knowledge. And that's exactly what IdeaMarket is about. So that passage was inspired in part by an experience that I had as an atheist teenager. I read a book called Radical Honesty, and it was about, it was by a psychotherapist who recommends being incredibly honest, not only with others, but with yourself about your motivations and all
What's the
your
name of the
secret
author? I have it in the
thoughts.
tip of my tongue.
Brad Blanton.
Bradland. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this book a lot. And I read it when I was maybe 15 and I was in high school. And I started to practice it in the sense that if I was doing something mischievous and I got caught by some administrator, I would tell them, oh, yeah, I was doing this mischievous thing. And if I wasn't expecting to get caught, and if I hadn't been, I was going to do this other mischievous thing too. And what happened was when I would do that, the situation would work itself out in a far more beneficial way than it would have if I had tried to contrive an outcome. And I started to get the sense, even as a staunch atheist, like I was a Reddit style annoying atheist as a teenager before it was cool.
Debate people on
And
Facebook.
yeah, and in real life, really. So
Yeah.
even as an atheist, I started to have this experience of truth being a force that is good and comes to your aid and like mysteriously organizes things to work out. And that eventually led to a reversal of my atheism. It's kind of a long story, but all of that is part of the leap of faith that IdeaMarket is, or I should say it's part of the bet that IdeaMarket is, because IdeaMarket is not only asking people to bet that the truth will prevail and that the truth has value, it is itself a bet that the truth will prevail and that the truth has value. So that's what that passage is about.
And we were... Oh, okay. I'm gonna stay in God for a second, because I just finished this book. It's by Robert Sawyer. It's the same author of The Martian. I never saw the movie. I never read The Martian. I never interacted with any of his work before. But someone recommended this to me, and I gave it a try. It's called Calculating God. It's a science fiction book, and it's all based on the premise that aliens arrive to Earth, and the people that enter in contact with them are very surprised because aliens are 100% sure that there is a God and the universe had a creator, and they don't align with the simulation theory or anything. They're just like very hardcore creationists, and they talk about all their experiences in other planets. So that's a very interesting one. It really makes you shift into another gear if you're not 100 convinced or if you're not 100% religious, just to think in terms of, okay, what if all my quote unquote science-based atheism is rooted on something else? I'd really recommend that one to you, Calculating God, and to anyone listening to this. It's a short read. You really need a night if you get into it.
That sounds fun. I will see about checking that. I don't want to make any promises, but I will check it out.
yeah. I hate when people expect me to read whatever they recommend to me. No worries.
I mean, I would love to do it, but stuff.
On the side of IdeaMarket and bets again, we had a fun conversation with ShapeShift's Ken Barton when we were just imagining use cases for NFTs, and one of them was that actually NFTs could be a way of tracking cancel culture just on value. And I think the IdeaMarket is, I didn't think of it IdeaMarket in that moment, but I think IdeaMarket would be way better suited than an NFT to do that kind of thing. Have you been able to track any trends that would not be immediately intuitive thanks to this system?
Thank you, and I agree. IdeaMarket is built specifically for this, and the high gas fees have inhibited growth to the point where we're still in the phase where people are buying things that they expect to grow as a consequence of the market growing. People buy, Elon Musk is at the very top just because they know that when IdeaMarket gets huge, the Elon listing will be huge. So it hasn't become mature enough yet where we can see distinct differences between the market results and the current social atmosphere.
Okay, that's a radically honest answer. I like that. I would ask you then, how do you expect these to shift once you're fully on a layer 2 and that we don't have the problem of high fees?
Once we're on a layer 2, I'm expecting that people will be much more interested in the income stream aspect of this, particularly influencers and journalists, because it basically means if you have an audience, you have an income stream. And in addition, the in order to claim your account and verify your income stream, you have to send a tweet. And this is something that BitClout popularized, but we actually did it first. We actually did it on February 15th when we launched. And the sort of flywheel of influencers claiming their account and in turn having this new income stream that comes from the support of their followers, I'm hoping that will ignite and continue along those lines in a very sound and well audited way.
Are there any other trends, or are there any other use cases that you're hoping to see pick up once we're fully on layer 2s and fees are not an issue?
Yeah, there are many actually. I'm about to launch my own personal newsletter, my own Substack, michaelelias.substack.com. And the way I'm starting it is by buying tokens for my Substack listing and giving them away to the subscribers. So this is a way for anyone who wants to have an impact, journalist, activist, influencer of some kind, to give their audience a stake in their success. It seems like a very sort of logical way to use IdeaMarket to get started. And that's one of the use cases that I'm expecting will make sense to people once we get going.
Cool. 100% after this conversation, I'm 100% listing myself on IdeaMarket. Once it doesn't cost $500 for me to do so. At the moment, I'm not too comfortable paying that fee, but one day, man.
That's perfectly fine. If you're just sign up on our mailing list, and you'll be notified as soon as Arbitrum is live, probably 3 or 4 times before then too. And yeah, we want to make sure that everyone who wants to get listed can easily and cheaply do that when the time comes.
Is it reasonable to say sometime in September?
Yeah, that seems pretty likely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, man, thank you very much. If you ever want to come back on the podcast, please feel free to let me know. I'll add you on Telegram after this. And thanks a lot. It was a really fun conversation.
Thank you very much, man. I really enjoyed it too, and I could do this all day. So same thing. If something comes up that you want my opinion on, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Cool. And well, thanks everyone for listening to this. If you of course are still around after this means that you also enjoyed it. And if you haven't, please go check out IdeaMarket and go follow Mike here. What's your Twitter account again?
My Twitter account is HarmonyLion1, and IdeaMarket is at ideamarket.io.
Also, congrats on the podcast, man. It's you're on episode 4, I think, right now. So yeah, it really feels like the right move. I would say that most companies, most projects don't need to have a podcast. Yours does, and it's pretty good.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Keep the feedback coming, because it's an experiment for everyone, and we're releasing 1 episode per week now on Mondays is the pattern.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And if just go check Mike's stuff out. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you so much.